Okay, so this is Go Math, and we are talking about 9.4 right now, lesson 9.4, and we're taking all the information that we had up to this point. We had independent and dependent variables, right? So independent and dependent variables. And we had x and y, we sometimes called them that, which is also an in and out chart, right? Just like you did in 4th grade, 5th grade. We have a rule based on our in and out chart, which is the same thing as an equation. So when you're talking about equations, you're talking about rules, they're all the same thing. We're just taking it one step further every time. So if I had an x and y, or an in and out chart, a independent and dependent variables, and maybe I would say 2 to 4, 3 to 6, 4 to 8, and 5 to 10. Well, what I have here is a rule that obviously my equation will be that 2x equals y. Whatever happens to x changes what happens to y. So y depends on x was my in-out table. So now I want to take this idea and realize that these are x and y, and I want to cycle back to a previous unit, maybe unit 5, I believe, and we get a coordinate grid. But we're not going to use the whole coordinate grid. We're going to take an idea from just quadrant 1, the plus plus, the positive positive, right? So what I have here is I'm going to go ahead and make myself some main points on my coordinate grid here. And we'll go 4, 6, 8, 10. And I'm going to call this relationships. If we're making a graph, it should have a title, it should have labels. Since I don't have the actual information here, I don't have my labels, but I am going to put a title. The hardest part about graphing this stuff is realizing that the relationship between them, you want to make sure that it's spaced out large enough so that everything can be seen in your graph. So for example, if I have 2, 4, I know that 2 is x, and x is down here. You run before you jump. 2 to 4, and I have 3 to 6, and I have 4 to 8, and I have 5 to 10. Now everything in this unit is going to come out to be roughly a straight line. So if you have a number or a dot that is not on a straight line, it's not really going to make sense. And what you want to do with that is kind of step back. The point being, in our last unit, we saw something like this. That was a 1, 2, 3, 4. And it was our number line. And I would say, well, 2 and everything above it. I can do the same thing here because everything on this line is a correct answer. So I want to make sure that if I had 3 1/2, I can figure out that that's 7. Okay, it's right here on my relationship line, on my chart here. Okay, so what does that look like in your book? Boop, and it's going to go something like this. Let me erase that other part here. A cafeteria has an automatic pancake making machine. Very nice for them. The table shows the relationship between the time in hours and the number of pancakes that the machine can graph. Now we make the relationship created by this table here into a graph. And we're going to look at this. So we have time in hours. That's going to be our x and pancakes y, right? So if I were looking at that, let x represent time in hours and y represent the number of pancakes. This is dependent and independent variables, right? So our dependent variables, the number of pancakes made, depends on the number of hours that I'm making pancakes. Well, looking at them as x and y, I can make them into coordinate pairs. So over here I have 1 hour to 200 pancakes. So there's my relationship. So I have x times 200 equals y. So now I've made that into an equation. If I look at this and I make them an x and a y relationship, remember in your coordinate grid, sing the alphabet. L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So x and then y. If I come to 2, my y is 400. 3, my y is 600. Down here, 4, my y is 800. And 5, my y is 1,000. So seeing that they are essentially x and y coordinate grid, we realize that these are all the same thing. We're having the same conversation that we've been having since unit 3 at least, right? Where we start putting these things together. So now how do I graph this? Let's go to my next slide. And I have a graph over here. I'm going to put all the information that I had before, 1 to 200, 2 to 400, 3 3 to 600, 4 to 800, and this is just what I had on the last slide, and 5 to 1,000. Now, I come over here to my graph, and the first thing you'll see, I notice I have, in fact, a title, Pancake Production. I have labels, time in hours, and pancakes made. Clean that up a little bit with all my sloppy lines. The next hardest part is realizing how far spaced I want everything. So I have my hours at 1, 2, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So make each one its own number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you might say, well, Mr. W, I don't have 6 as a coordinate grid over here, or as a coordinate pair. You're absolutely right. Doesn't matter, right? I want to fill out my graph. It doesn't make sense to me to put like 1 through 6 here and 1 through 1,000 here, and my whole graph be this little chunk. Take the whole section that you have. Make it really easy to read. All right, so then I have 200, 400. Let's follow the pattern. 600, 800, and 1,000. Now I just connect the dots, right? 1 to 200, 2 to 400, 3 to 600, 4 to 800, 5 to 1,000, and I don't have 6 on here. Once I've made my dots, and that's important, you don't want to guess, just make your dots and then connect them with a line. Now I'm freehanding this line, but if I had a ruler that would be completely straight. So I don't see any dots that are sticking off of my line, and that's an easy way for me to check to see how well I've managed to keep track of my chart here. If all of a sudden I have a dot that is over here, I realize I probably made a mistake somewhere. Now, a little bit later, we are going to start seeing more dots spread up, and we're going to be looking for this line, which is the main section of my data. But for our purposes right now in Unit 9, look for that straight line, make sure that you've plotted all your data points. So let's look at one more. Take a look at one more and see what we've got here. Bikes assembling. So I've got a young man who is working, and he is assembling bikes, right? So our bikes left to assemble, it's 0 to 10, and I'm going to put that graph right here. So in and out, 0 to 10, 1 to 8, 1 to 8, he has 3 to 4, 4 to 2, and we're missing a number, and that is 2 right here, so in 2 hours. How can I find that missing value? Well, I come over here, and I'm going to call this bicycles. Bicycles assembled. Over here is number of bikes. And this is hours that he's working. I have labels. I have titles. I have my graph put together now. So I come over to the first one, and I go 0 to 10. This is a little different because most people go 0 and 10, and I want this graph to go up. But he's not making more bikes as he works. He's actually decreasing his workload. 0 to 10. 1 to 8. This is where I don't want to make assumptions. I don't want to just guess that I'm going to come up this way. Really take the time and go, which one is X and which one is Y? And again, they're going to label them for you right there if you're looking really carefully. Okay? So 8, 1 to 8, 2, I'm not sure. 3 goes to 4, and 4 goes to 2. And that's all the information that I have on this gentleman and his workday. So if I draw my straight line, bring it on down where I got to see my hand here. I have a straight line. It is going to take him 5 hours to complete all those bikes. And I'm looking for my missing number, which is at 2. I go to 2 and I come up. And where's my value? I already see it on my graph. So the missing value is 6. Now if I check the pattern, I see 8, 6, 4, 2. It's decreasing by 2. So I can double check my work there too. But looking at your graphs and your charts, and making a graph out of them, I want to make sure that I understand my X and my Y, which is my in and out. It's my independent and dependent variable. We're talking about the same thing. In those, I can make them coordinate pairs. And my coordinate pairs can then be graphed on my table, which is really just, what are we talking about? We're talking about hours being 1 to 8. And where those connect, I put my dot. And when I have all of my dots, I make a straight line, and any information that's missing can be found here without doing any additional work, such as how many bikes will he make in 2 hours? Well, what if he only works 3.5 hours? Come to 3.5 and come up, and, well, he's making about 3 bikes, give or take, all right? So really take your time, make sure that you understand your X and your Y and which value is going in which. Double check before you put your information on your graph and make sure your graph has a title and both of its labels.